You're listening to the Life Friendly Business Podcast. I'm your host, Erin Thomas Wong, business mentor, author, and founder of the Cocoon VIP membership, empowering women around the world to build businesses on their terms. If you want to grow and scale a business that works in harmony with your family and your life, this podcast is for you. This is the Life Friendly Business Podcast. I'm your host, Erin Thomas Wong. Today I'm speaking to Marion Ellis. Marion is a chartered surveyor working as a business coach and mentor with surveyors who love what they do, but don't necessarily love running the business side of things. In this interview, we talk about being a woman in a very male-dominated industry and also the importance of personal development and being self-aware in order to thrive in our life and business. Hi, Marion. Thank you very much for joining me on the Life Friendly Business Podcast.
Hello.
So I'd love to know why you decided to go self-employed in the first place. Why did you start your own business?
So I'd like to have a really good answer about, having a passion and a mission, and this is something I really wanted to do. But actually, I felt like I had no other choice because I'd walked out of my corporate job, and I felt unemployable because my self-esteem, my confidence was on the floor, and I thought, well, I'll just be a stay-at-home mum. And about 2 weeks of that, I knew it was never going to happen. So I had to really rethink, what could I do? How could I help people? I thought about, do I go back to being a surveyor? But I've got a neck injury, so I knew I would be off and worrying more than doing the job. So I had to really rethink, what I could offer people and how I could help them. And while I was on garden leave, I did a project from a leadership program that I'd done a few years before and never quite completed. And it was called the Women in Surveying Virtual Summit, where I interviewed women about their careers and what it was like to work in a male-dominated industry. And, until that time, I didn't have a Twitter account. I didn't know how to use I set up MailChimp, I didn't know about Zoom, and it all sort of came together. And I realized that the places that I'd been hanging out, either on Facebook or, in this coaching program that I'd been on, I got to know lots of small businesses, particularly women. And they did everything from make, pictures out of buttons on their kitchen table through to multi-million-pound PR firms. And so when it came to, doing this virtual summit, I really realized I had all of this resource, all of this help, and I just did it. I felt a little bit like Lorraine Kelly on the sofa interviewing people, which is quite, when I look back at them now, they're on YouTube and I just cringe. But, it was that first sort of getting myself out there. And I realized that I did have the skills and the wherewithal. I just had to think about, well, what is my journey in business going to be like? What is it I'm actually going to do to earn money? And would that be as a surveyor, or would it be, something totally different? And I got offered a consultancy job by a friend who used to teach valuation. She said, picked me up and said, right, you can do this. I'm busy. You take over from me. And that then got me back into working, and seeing what I could do. And it became a journey from there, really. I realized what I had to offer with my 20 years plus of experience in property and very specialist residential defect and valuation claims for surveyors. And that then led me into coaching and all the different things that I do now. So I wish I had a really witty story, but it was because I was on the floor and I didn't have anything else.
So did you leave your employed role due to burnout?
It was a combination of things. I think ultimately, as I look back now, I had totally outgrown it. It wasn't the right fit and probably hadn't been the right fit for quite some time. But I'd been offered a director position. And, it was great to have that on your CV. But it became apparent really quickly that they probably didn't want to hire me in that position. It was like, what can we do with Marion? and that was quite hard. It was a difficult time, but at that point, that's where I felt I experienced sexism in the industry. You get to know who your friends are or aren't, and it was a really difficult time. But it got to a point where I realised that, through the personal development and coaching that I had off my own back and paid for on my own back, sort of previously, that I realised, that how strong I was, and I was probably unmanageable, and the situation was never going to get any better. And a couple of different things happened, and I just thought to myself, if I don't leave, my mental health will suffer. And I'd had a bit of burnout when I came back off my maternity leave from my second child, which was really difficult. And I was, stereotypical crazy woman as we see these people. And I just had this flashback of, if I don't do this and take this leap, I could be there again, and it will be much worse. So it was more of a preventative. I was really calm actually when I decided to make the decision, and then obviously I crashed about a month later.
So you really did leave that profession because of all those things that you just talked about, your well-being and all those things, but you didn't necessarily leave thinking, right, I'm going to start my own business. It sounds like actually once you'd left, you kind of discovered this world of opportunity that was out there. And by the different people and the different things that came up for you, you were able to carve your own path from there.
Yeah, and I think at that stage, I knew that my time was running out, but I knew that my journey was going to change in the next year or so. I knew that, and I was prepared for learning this new role and thinking about, okay, what are my next steps going to be and what would I want to do? But then things just came to a head, and I think looking back, I am quite impulsive. I've now been diagnosed with ADHD, which is an impulsive thing. But this wasn't, this was do you know what? This is just not right. And, there were lots of things that were triggering for me in terms of my values and what was important to me. And I think when you do that personal development and you know yourself better, you can make good decisions. And as hard as it was a horrible time. As hard as it was a really good decision for me longer term.
So how long ago was this?
That was 4 years ago.
4 years ago. And do you want to just give us a picture of how life is for you now with your business and what it is that you're doing?
Gosh, so totally different. I feel like I've come out of my shell in lots of ways, but it's been a journey, a journey of building my confidence, knowing what's important to me and the way that I want to work. And fitting that around my family, and it's not necessarily been easy, but I'm in such a better place now, knowing what I do. But now I run effectively a coaching business, so I support surveyors who love what they do, but don't necessarily love all the running the business stuff. And with that, as we know as small business owners, all the mindset stuff, the juggling, the cash flow, all of those things that come with it. But as I went through that journey over the past few years, one of the things that I did is I applied for my fellowship. And going through, and that really was a journey of, am I a surveyor anymore? Because when you've got a technical profession or qualification in some way, we have a very narrow view of what that looks like. And through my career, my background is in defect and valuation claims, and I became more of a manager, problem solver. So was I a real surveyor anymore? And so going through that journey of getting my fellowship actually re-engaged me in the profession that I'm in, and made me realize that, I am a surveyor. I just do it this way. And so the way that I help people, rather than going out doing surveys a couple of times a day, what I do now is help surveyors do that better. And so for me, I have a much bigger impact. So in my coaching, I have a mastermind that I run. I have a business club, one-to-one coaching, but all in the context of surveying or people who are in the business of surveying. So it's quite niche.
How do you find being a woman in a very male-dominated industry? How has that been for you?
really interesting. When about 15 years ago, I went to an event at Nottingham Trent Uni. It was like a women in construction type event, and they had, trying to encourage females in, and there were lots of students there, and they had speakers. Then they had these working groups afterwards, and as mentors, we would sort of walk around the tables, and they would ask us questions. And I remember one lady saying to me, "What do you do about the men?" And I said, "Well, I don't beat them off with a stick." And there was this sort of perception that you're coming into a male-dominated industry, therefore it's all grubby, and there's rude pictures up on the wall, and it's not like that. It shows itself in different ways, and I think the generation that went before me and the generation that comes after me have different experiences of what it means to be a female in a male-dominated area, place of work, an industry. And so my experience is different from others, but there is a sense of belonging that doesn't always happen, that sort of inclusion, that care and consideration. And I would say I never experienced anything until I got to that sort of senior level of my career. And then I felt it just hit me by stealth, and I started to see all of these different things. And so for me, it came as a woman of a certain age, of a certain stage of career where I started to experience it. I had anything when I was, I used to work on building sites and construction sites. Not really. And if it was in jest, but it was done in a caring way. It wasn't done in a awful sexist way. But it was interesting doing the virtual summit that I did, because then women would come to me with their bag of worries and their problems. And that really led me to becoming a coach, because I needed to protect myself with that and know how to handle it, how to signpost people. So I trained as a women's leadership coach, although I work mainly with men now, as it happens. But that was really interesting. There were women on site who didn't feel safe. There were women who carry gaffer tape around with them because their PPE safety gear doesn't fit them properly. And if you're climbing up and down ladders, you could get caught and have an accident. Welfare facilities, menopause, all of these things started to come out. So, but it's really interesting. So I've been quite an ambassador and champion for women, in my sector. And, there are those that say we should not have a women's group. And I know you've been through that whole sort of mumpreneur journey. We shouldn't have that. We should be inclusive and not have separate groups. And that's okay if we were in a society of, patriarchy, that's 2,000 years that we've had, that will be fine, but we're not there yet. And importantly, like women like me and beyond, who are still going later on in their mature years, there needs to be some recognition that actually things weren't great, but now we know we do better. And we need to acknowledge that we can't cancel that cancel culture. We can't do that. And I think that's one of the tricky things that we need to navigate. Women are not a minority, but we're treated as such. What I'm pleased to say is, since I did that piece of work, 4 years ago, I was talking about 16% women in my sector. Now it's up to 19%. And I hope that grows. But there's lots of parts to that story, new ladies coming in, but also retention, which is really, really key.
And one of your kind of roles, it seems to be, is a thought leader in your sector. And obviously, you've got your opinions about things. How do you find that journey of getting visible and putting yourself out there now that you are running your own business, you're not working for someone else anymore? How does that work for you?
On the one hand, it's really liberating. On the other hand, it's been quite scary, and you have to build up your confidence. So, on day one, did I feel I could go out and say some of the things that I do, which might be controversial for some? No, of course not. My first LinkedIn posts were literally shaking with fear. Would anybody comment or like? And so I've gone on a journey of building an audience, if you like, and building up that credibility and reputation. And you do have to push your boundaries But what I've learned, and I don't know if it's being of a certain age. I'm 47. I've gone through the menopause, and you just get to a point where you just think, I'm just going to say it, and you just get it off that. There's that sort of liberating feeling. So although to all those younger women out there, you will get to a point where you just don't give a two hoots. So you do get to that point, but I've had to work up to it, and I've had to be confident on what I'm about and who I stand for. But I also think, and I don't like being called an inspiration. I don't like being called a role model, although people do say that. But I do think if I don't show that I'm deserving of, this reputation, this business, of saying these things, then what does that send to others? And I didn't have the role models. I don't think I still have the role models out there. So we've got to break patterns. And so if me pushing myself a bit more helps others, then so be it. I run a podcast like you. I have to say, I'm the other side of the fence now, and that is really triggering me in all sorts of ways. I was really nervous, but hearing women's voices out there talking about these things, if I thought I would have a podcast 4 years ago, I'd have laughed my socks off, totally not. But if it's the next thing, it's the next thing to do. And, now I'm at a stage where I don't feel like push myself, but I just feel into what's right. And I think that coaching, that knowing yourself better can help you do that, and it helps you make better decisions.
Absolutely. And, we talk quite a bit about the zone of genius, don't we? And like finding your flow and being in that place where you know what you're good at. You also know what you struggle at. And that's where you reach out and get support. I think the comment you made about you get to an age where you're like, do you know what? I don't give two hoots. I remember someone saying to me, it's when you turn 40, and I'm 43 now. And I absolutely agree. I just like all the worry that I used to have about what would people think if I say this. Now I can't shut myself up sometimes because I'm just like, I'm going to say it.
It's like, wouldn't you like to go back to your younger self, and just say, don't worry, it is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I even in my teens, I didn't have someone guiding me, showing me the way. And that's why mentorship is so, so important. But also someone to say, you've got the tools, Marion, you just haven't worked out the roadmap, you haven't worked out what the plan is yet. You've got the tools, you just haven't figured it out. And I think just knowing that that you can do that, and it's a problem to solve, would have been so liberating.
And I think that is so important as well, that, everything you've been talking about is the fact that, like you say, over these last 4 years, it's been such a learning curve, and you are a different person to where you were 4 years ago. And, if people listening are feeling really like, the stuff they want is out of their reach, they just have to keep taking those steps forward, because we grow and we learn with every day. And, the whole thing about the business being a marathon and not a sprint, like we just have to keep taking those actions and see what opportunities come up and see who we connect with and all those things.
I think one of the things that I've learned to trust myself over is it's really hard to have a business plan. And I know we all need to talk about having a plan and where you're going, but I've really struggled with that, particularly long term. But what really helped me in those first 18 months was just to get curious and say, what interests me? What do I love? Do I like that client or not? Do I want to do that again or not? Do I like teaching? Do I like presenting? And really feel into what feeds your soul. And I know that I need to do work that I love to do. Otherwise, I'm totally off kilter. And I have to remind myself I get a choice. I can say no.
That's what I was just about to say. It is that it's recognizing that we do have the power to shape our business in the way we want to shape it, rather than feeling like, we have to do things, we should be doing things, even if we're not enjoying it, even if it's sucking out all the energy from us. We don't have to do that, but we need to take back the power with that.
It's very hard not to have comparisonitis, though. And it's very hard when you're learning new things, not to follow a formula, to say, have the Facebook group, have the lead magnet, do this package. There's lots of formulas out there, and that takes you to a point, but you need to recognize that might not work for you and it might not work for your clients. And that's something that I've had to recognize. I'm on a learning journey. Where is this going? But taking a couple of steps back every now and again and pause sometimes, to see where things are heading and where I want them to be.
And what kind of support have you got in your business?
So I've really struggled to get support. And I started off with, I can do everything myself. And then, I can't afford to pay anyone to do anything. And I have a PA, quite traditional PA, who helps me manage my diary. She's an absolute rock. She helps me with making sure I've got processes in place, what I call my black box, where all my documents are and everything. So really, really grounding. So she does a couple of hours a month for me. And then I've worked with lots of different VAs, tech VAs, social VAs. Some have worked, some have not. And what I've started to do over the last 12 months is bring in experts. So rather than think there's one person who can do everything. So I've had a lady who works specifically on Active Campaign, who turned out to be a godsend. I've got a website guy who does certain things. I've got another lady now who's helping me edit my podcasts and things. So having, a range of people to do specific things is where I'm at now. I would still love that miracle online business manager who can do everything. But I also recognize that it's not just about the work that they do for me. It's also how I show up and how good I am. I'm explaining things to people. And, it's two sides to a story. And actually, I want to do certain things, but I feel like I have to outsource them. So it's going through that exercise of, because you can do the stuff that you love, doesn't mean you're any good at it. And that can be a time waste. I absolutely love Canva. Play with it. I'm absolutely useless at it. If I have to create anything, I can tweak things. I can't create. So now I've got someone to create and I tweak. Just recognizing that has helped me move forward.
How does your work-life balance look?
Much better than it did a few years ago. So when I was in my corporate role, I was traveling up and down the country. I was really organized. I had 2 food shop deliveries on a Monday and a Friday. I had a childminder, I had an ironing lady, I had all this support around. And yet I was totally and physically burnt out, particularly when my daughter, when I had my daughter on my second maternity leave. And I remember coming back because I had to travel to Manchester from Milton Keynes, which is great when you've got a breast pump that you have to carry. And I remember coming back from Manchester one day, and I got on the train and I bumped into this guy, and it was like a Diet Coke moment. I mean, this guy was gorgeous, and I threw coffee all over him, and he looked at me and just said, "Are you okay? You look really grey." And I thought, thanks for that. You ruined my moment. Anyway, bustled on, sat down, looked in the mirror, and I looked awful. And I was on the wrong train. It was going to Euston, not stopping at Milton Keynes. I didn't have my breast pump, so I had these boobs like melons. And I remember just, then getting home, and then there was a series of this hasn't been done, that hasn't been done, and it wasn't working. So it was an early sign for me on what support I need to be successful or even to function. Now, in terms of my work-life balance, I generally work school hours. My kids are in after school club, my youngest anyway, once or twice a week. But I make time for myself during the day, to have something to eat, to get a bit of a break, to go for a walk. But I also recognize myself that I'm at my most creative between 4 and 6, which is when the kids want feeding or they want some attention or need homework doing. So I've had to really think about what I need and what they need. So I don't feel guilty about putting my daughter in after school club 2 days a week, because that gives me the creative time, headspace, whatever I need to do. I still have an ironing lady because I find it the most mundane thing ever, but it's the best 20 quid a fortnight I will ever spend or invest. And I don't feel guilty about those things because of what it gives me and what it gives us, importantly, as a family. So it is always a juggle. I absolutely hate that, but recognizing what I need as much as what the family needs has been really, really key. And I often talk to my clients about work-life integration, not balance, because when you're balancing, it's another thing to do. So I allow myself to be a surveyor and a coach when the kids are at home and work Saturdays, if I feel like it. But also then, I allow my family and me being me into my work too, because and that's been really quite liberating, I think, for me.
It is so important to recognise what we need in order to thrive, and that's huge. So you're in the Evolve Mastermind, and one thing we look at is the nice images of the 3 jars, if you've got business, life and you. And we talk about the fact that business might be amazing one month, you might have your best ever income, but you haven't spent any time with the kids and you're really suffering from mum guilt, and you haven't spent any time looking after yourself, and so you're feeling really depleted and burnt out. So even though you've kind of had success in the business, you feel rubbish and you don't feel that sense of fulfillment. So definitely working out what we need in all these different areas and feeling, and I love the word integration, but also it doesn't have to be, we're not talking about equal measures of time either when it comes to business and kids and self-care, but it's about a feeling, isn't it? It's all about feeling like things are feeling in balance and settled, and that we're in control of all those different elements as much as we can be.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you feel like that, you're much more productive, and what I can get done in an hour between, at tea time is sometimes much more than I can do all day, at home. And so it's really important that we tune into that. I think particularly as women with our hormones and everything that's going on, we've really got to tune into that. Earlier on this year, I did take some time away from my business, or rather being visible in my business. So I didn't record a podcast. I didn't really put myself out there in the usual way. And that was really a couple of reasons. I'd had some a bit of a backlash on social media over, I'm a volunteer for an organisation, and there was a lot of stuff going on. So I just took a step back. But also I got diagnosed with ADHD. And so I took this time sort of away because I knew that was important to process. And because I've done that, and it was a difficult working all these things out, because I've done that, I feel like I've come back now into, as we record this, it's end of June, nearly July, I've got more energy. And it's important sometimes just to look at the year as a whole. Where do I want to be by the end of the year? And I know I can make up at the end of the year what I didn't do earlier on. So having that bigger picture sometimes, and knowing why you're doing things can help you move forward.
And, we all know how solitary it can feel running your own business, and especially when you're facing issues of backlash and things like that on social media or in everyday life. How important do you think it is to surround yourself with people who understand that?
I think it is, but there is a danger that you become it's an echo chamber, of this is the way that things should be done. And as mums, we're very good at comparing ourselves to each other and how people run their businesses and run their lives. And so I think it's important to have other people that can challenge you, or can say, we do things differently, or to get that perspective. So, I couldn't do my work the way that I do without my husband's support. He couldn't do his work with a corporate in London if I didn't support him. And so I think recognizing that we're both part of a team, that every pound that comes into the family pot is a family pot, and and that makes a real difference. It is interesting, you said about it sort of being lonely. Actually, it is really lonely at times. And I find that because I don't run a traditional surveying business, even though, most of my clients do. And so, I find myself not just an odd one as a female surveyor, but an odd one as doing something a bit different. And so talking to people who, or having that sort of safe space, that circle of trust, which is what Evolve gives you and what my mastermind gives surveyors, having those circles of trust are really important. But what I've learned is you need to create them. It's very rare to find something like Evolve, which I've really enjoyed, but it's really, there's no off the shelf solution. And, creating communities, creating networks, that's something I've done a lot of because I haven't had it. And we don't always give ourselves permission to do that. I remember when I came off maternity leave, there were 2 other pregnant ladies or had just had babies, and the 3 of us met up in the cafe once a fortnight, and that was our mums group, and we talked about the mums group, and everyone said, oh, what's this mums group? But it was just because there was nobody there that we could talk to about what our babies were doing. And so if it's not there for you, just create it. Just start. As soon as you start talking about it or reaching out, you'll start to see that there are other people in the same boat as you or want to support you.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think, I did the same. I set up networking in West London for mums in business with my business partner then, Shelley. And I think that, especially if people are feeling isolated in their local area, there aren't networking opportunities, just start it. Put a group out on a Facebook, put a post out in a Facebook group and say, does anyone want to meet and do co-working in a local cafe or something like that? Like, we have to, first of all, recognize what we need in order to be happy and be well. And then we need to go out and get it. And that can be uncomfortable sometimes if you're not like particularly an extroverted person, but it's so worth it, isn't it? And, and it'll be benefiting other people as well.
It will. And I think the difference is you're doing it for a purpose and there's a clear reason. You'll be able to communicate that better and people will understand. When I did the Women in Surveying Virtual Summit, there was a bit of industry chatter over, am I setting up a women's organisation? There are something like 96 different women's organisations in the built environment. You do not need another official group, and arguably it should come from RICS or one of the other professional bodies. And so I didn't. I set it up as this is something that I've done. Would you like to take part of it? I do have a little Facebook group that female surveyors join, but I don't promote it. People find their way to it. And so sometimes you might need to think, you don't need to go formal. You just create a movement, and that is massively powerful, and don't never underestimate the power of knowing that for other people to know that there is just something out there and that people are talking about some of the issues that you might be facing. And when you put yourself out there, social media post or whatever it is, to share your experience or share something useful, even if you feel like it's, a tumbleweed moment and no one's reading it, someone will value what you're putting out there. If it comes from a good place, it's useful to people, it's authentic. So, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's not about committees and organizations. It's just starting to create something that helps people.
Absolutely. I really love that. And especially the point about putting posts out there. And even if you don't see any engagement, don't underestimate the ripple effect that will have, because people do read things that have a huge impact on them at that moment. You and I have talked before about having a conversation with someone at exactly the right time, how powerful that is. And you just don't know the impact you're having on people. And sometimes it's really lovely to meet people at a conference and they make a comment about, I remember seeing your Facebook Live or doing this. And you're like, wow, people are watching. But, they might never have pressed like or commented. We just don't know. So we're coming to the end now, but I've still got loads more I want to ask you. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of things. How do you keep your mindset on track?
I'm not into meditating or yoga or things like that. I might start something and then not finish it. I guess it's making sure that I'm enjoying what I'm doing. And if I'm enjoying what I'm doing, then it affects everything else in my life. So, I just started recording podcasts again, which I haven't done since December. And I love it. I get to chat to people about their careers and things. And I just love it. So it gives me a buzz, and that takes me through the rest of the day. And I hadn't realized how much I'd missed it. So I think concentrating on doing the things that you love is really important. But for me, not getting too tired, not overdoing it. I now restrict the travel that I do, the hours that I work. I mean, even though I sort of flit in and out of things, I try not to have too many commitments on at one time, so that I can dip into it when I want to. So things become much more fluid. I do run. I've been doing Couch to 5K. I've just completed it, although I haven't run for a couple of weeks. But I do run. But I find I can't run when I'm stressed. Some people do that for mental health and running, or I do it to listen to a podcast. But all of that is okay. I used to feel really bad that I didn't like meditating, but I would just fall asleep every time. So, but now I just tune into what I need, how I'm feeling, and making sure my energy is up and looking after myself.
Managing your energy is huge, isn't it? I think that's one thing that in a kind of busy society that we live in, people just push themselves to the absolute limits and they don't listen to their bodies.
I think particularly when you hit menopause or perimenopause, because it happens 10 years before you think it's going to happen. And, I think my daughter was the last egg that I popped out before it then all kicked off. But it can happen an awful lot sooner. But as a society and as women, we don't tune into that. We don't know about it. We certainly don't talk about it. I remember, having my daughter when I was 40, just turned 40, and my mum saying, "Oh, you'll be getting the menopause next." I'm like, what? Should all the women in our family had it early? And I did. And you just think, I'd love to have known that. Thanks for that helpful information, Mum. But we need to talk about those things as women and normalize a lot of it, because it does affect us so much. When you think about the symptoms of perimenopause that affect our sleep, our anxiety, all of these things are quite profound. And so it can really have a dramatic impact on it.
Yeah. And opening up that conversation is, so important.
But it's manageable, and there are things that you can do about it. But even just knowing it's not you going crazy or failing, but knowing that there is a reason, turns it into a positive. And I think, it's great. We've got Davina McCall talking about menopause and things, but I think we need to not be scared about it and approach it in a much more positive way.
Absolutely. So what's coming up next for you?
So I've got my mastermind, which has just started. I run that 3 times a year. The podcast is out and going well. And I guess I'm just going back to doing what I love. And I think really, in some ways, working smarter. I don't have to be everywhere. People think in surveying I'm all over social media. I'm not really. They just think I am, which is good. So really doing what I love, managing my time and using it smartly, so I make more of an impact or reach more people, but without taking up all of that time.
And that's what we need to do if we want a life-friendly business, is to work more smartly and, be more effective with our time. So where can people find you?
So people can find me. My website is lovesurveying.com, or you can find me on the usual social media channels, love_surveying.
And one final question. So if you could go back and speak to Marion 4 years ago when she left the corporate world, what advice would you give her?
I would say take the time to get yourself physically back on top, and that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Oh, I love that so much. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marion. It's been great to speak to you today.
Very welcome.
Does every win feel slightly tinged with guilt? Do you have your best month ever financially in your business, but yet you feel like it's been at the detriment of your health or your family? The success and fulfillment you're looking for can only be enjoyed when your business and home life are balanced in harmony. It's time to stop trading off between life and business. It's time to evolve them both. Join me for our next 12-week Evolve Mastermind, where you'll work towards your next stretch business goal while maintaining the balance across all areas of your life, so that when you reach your goal, you feel successful, not exhausted, behind, or neglectful. It's time to take back the power. Find out more about the Evolve Mastermind at lifefriendlybusiness.com.